I wasn't supposed to see her again. Not today. Not ever, maybe. And yet, there she was, leaning against the doorway of the little cafe I ducked into for a quiet coffee, like she'd been waiting for me all along. She hadn't changed much. Her hair was the same warm chestnut streaked with soft silver, pulled back loosely so that a few strands framed her face. The faint lines around her eyes gave her gravity, but somehow made her smile sharper, more deliberate. She wore a muted green sweater that softened her shoulders, and a pair of jeans that made her look casual yet impossibly elegant. She didn't notice me staring, or maybe she did, and that was part of the game. I shuffled my hands in my lap, trying not to show how utterly unprepared I was for her presence. The air between us was suddenly too tight, too alive, like the space itself had been holding its breath. When she stepped closer to the counter, I could feel the heat from her body even from a half-meter away. My stomach twisted in that familiar ache I had learned to mistake for nerves, though I knew it was something else entirely. "Hey," I said, too quietly, like even my voice might break the spell. She glanced at me, eyes catching mine, and for a fraction of a second, it felt like she had nowhere else to go but into that gaze. Her lips quirked upward, not quite a smile, but a promise of one. I wanted to reach out, to touch the back of her hand, but instead my fingers twitched, brushing the edge of the table like a coward. She moved slightly, and our hands almost collided, the brush electric, sending a shiver up my arm. I remembered every detail of her, every subtle habit I had observed before, how she tilts her head when thinking, how she bites the corner of her lip when she's amused or unsure. And now, here she was again, the room humming quietly around her, making the air feel thicker, warmer, almost scented with her presence, though I couldn't place it. Cinnamon, her perfume, or just her. "Didn't expect to see you," she said, voice calm, but not casual. There was a tension in it, a barely controlled tremor that made me wonder what she felt, and if she was as unsettled as I was. I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, though my chest was tight and my pulse loud in my ears. "Yeah, I was just, grabbing some coffee." Her gaze lingered on me too long, and in that silence, the world outside the cafe melted away. There were only the quiet clinks of spoons and the low hum of a barista steaming milk. But it was all background noise. All I could register was the soft curve of her jaw, the way her fingers tapped the counter absent-mindedly, the faint sigh she didn't bother hiding when her eyes found mine again. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words seemed useless. Instead, I leaned forward slightly, drawn to her like a moth, feeling my fingers twitch again, hoping for contact I wasn't brave enough to initiate. She shifted, closing the distance, just barely, and the faint scent of her hair brushed my cheek. My heart thumped harder, and I couldn't tell if it was fear, longing, or both. Then, just as the moment reached its tipping point, when the silence between us was nearly unbearable, the cafe door swung open, sending a sudden gust of cold air over our skin. She stiffened, and I blinked, breaking the spell, though the tension lingered like a charged wire between us. Her eyes met mine again, steady and unreadable, and I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The cafe was quieter now, the morning rush thinning, leaving just the hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clink of porcelain. We settled at a corner table, not far, not close, suspended in that in-between space where everything felt charged. I tried to focus on the coffee in front of me, but my gaze kept drifting. She had this way of filling a room without moving, as if gravity bent toward her. Her fingers brushed the rim of her cup, slow, deliberate, and I caught myself imagining what it would feel like if she touched my hand instead. I pushed the thought away and sipped, grimacing at the bitterness, though not really tasting it. I thought, she started, her voice hesitating. Then she stopped, letting the sentence hang, unfinished, like she knew too much yet wouldn't admit it. I wanted to say that I thought the same, that I believed we were done, that seeing her again shouldn't be happening, but saying it aloud would ruin the fragile equilibrium between us. So I said nothing. I remembered why this was dangerous. Me, 20, still figuring out life in jagged, uncertain pieces. Her, 40-something, elegant, experienced, with her own quiet history of loss, perhaps, or regret. People would talk. I would stumble over words trying to explain the impossible. And still, I couldn't look away. She shifted in her chair, leaning slightly closer under the pretense of checking her phone. The movement was casual, but her elbow brushed mine. Just the faintest contact, enough to send warmth up my arm. I froze, pretending to read the menu again, even though nothing made sense anymore except the proximity. The brush of her hair against my shoulder as she leaned. Her perfume, subtle, warm, lingering, seemed designed to unbalance me. "You've changed," she said suddenly, voice soft but edged with something. Recognition, maybe disappointment, maybe amusement. I swallowed, unsure whether to laugh or deny it. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe. I just notice more now." The words were clumsy, but I couldn't stop them. Her gaze lingered on mine, holding me accountable for something I hadn't yet named. I saw the faint crease at the corner of her mouth, the way her hand drummed lightly against the table as though she was trying to contain herself. She wanted to reach out, I knew, but she didn't. And I wanted her to. A pause stretched between us, thick and electric, filled with memories neither of us mentioned. Coffee cooled. The barista cleaned around us, but time felt suspended in the small space, where her knee was almost brushing mine under the table, where her breath occasionally drifted past me when she laughed quietly at something I didn't fully catch. Then, almost instinctively, our hands brushed again. Not a bold touch, just fingers grazing across the table. I didn't pull away. She didn't either. For the first time that morning, the air felt like it belonged to both of us. She looked at me then, those eyes steady, impossible to read, and I understood. Whatever the risk, whatever the hesitation, whatever we had claimed about being done, it wasn't over. And in that pause, the tension between us didn't diminish. It deepened. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the cafe windows, painting lines across the table. I was trying to focus on my phone, anything to avoid looking at her. But every time I glanced up, she was there, leaning slightly closer than necessary, her shoulder brushing mine under the table again. A notification buzzed in my pocket, and I jumped, fumbling my phone. My pulse jumped too, not from the message, but from the brief distance it had created between us. She watched me with that faint, knowing smile, tilting her head, eyes soft but sharp. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice low, casual. But I could hear the undercurrent, the unspoken meaning, the way the syllables lingered like a whispered challenge. "Yeah," I muttered. "Just a message." I glanced at the screen, heart still thudding. It was from a friend I hadn't expected to hear from. I typed back quickly, but she leaned even closer, as if drawn by the rhythm of my racing pulse. The proximity made me aware of the curve of her neck, the warmth radiating off her sweater, the subtle brush of her hair against my hand when I moved it. My stomach twisted. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't want this. And yet I did. Every nerve in me wanted to close the distance, to tilt my head, to feel her lips near mine. She tilted hers slightly, just enough that our eyes locked, and the world shrank to the narrow space between us, dense with unspoken tension. "I keep thinking about last time," she said suddenly, her voice catching on the last word, almost more to herself than me. I swallowed, nodding, though I wasn't sure I should encourage her, or me. We stayed like that for a moment, the air thick with hesitation. My hand twitched, almost reaching for hers, but I froze. Guilt flared, guilt for thinking this was okay. Guilt for wanting something everyone else would call inappropriate. And yet, the thought of pulling away made me tense in a way I couldn't control. A loud laugh from the doorway startled us. My head snapped up, and so did hers. A group of students, early arrivals, crowded the entryway. She quickly leaned back, adjusting her posture as if nothing had happened. I exhaled, relief mingling with frustration. My chest still ached. When the space cleared, we drifted closer again, almost magnetically, drawn to the tension that neither of us could name. Our knees brushed. Her hand hovered near mine, trembling slightly before retreating. I could smell her perfume again, a gentle, sweet warmth that made the rational part of my brain groan. "I shouldn't," she whispered, barely audible, but the words did nothing to create distance. Instead, they drew me closer, tightening the invisible thread between us. I leaned in slightly, and she did the same, our breaths mingling briefly, hot, electric, suspended in that fragile instant. And then we froze. Not from fear, exactly. More like recognition, of desire, of danger, of the uncharted line we were both so close to crossing. But even as we pulled back slightly, the closeness lingered, heavier now, more insistent, impossible to ignore. I could feel her heartbeat against mine without touching. And somehow, despite ourselves, despite logic and guilt, and everything we told ourselves, we were closer than ever. The sky had dimmed outside, the cafe lights casting soft halos around her. Every time I looked at her, I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't name, something I wasn't sure I was ready for, and yet couldn't resist. She laughed at a joke I didn't even make, leaning closer than necessary, her shoulder brushing mine, under the table again. That small contact sent a spark straight through me, and I swallowed, feeling my pulse thrum in my throat. She caught me staring and didn't look away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, letting the curl of hair fall across her cheek. My hand itched to move, to tuck it back, to let my fingers linger against her skin. I didn't. "You're different now," she murmured, voice low, almost intimate, like she was confessing something to herself and me both. "Different how?" I asked, my own voice tight, betraying the tension I was trying to contain. She paused, eyes flicking to mine, the faintest quiver in her lip. "I don't know. More reckless? Or maybe just honest." I wanted to tell her I felt the same, that I'd been honest in ways I hadn't admitted even to myself, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I leaned just a fraction closer, drawn like a magnet to her warmth. Her breath brushed against my ear as she shifted, and the small, intimate sensation made me dizzy. "You don't have to say it," she whispered, almost teasingly, almost warningly. My chest tightened. Whatever it is, her hand hovered near mine, almost touching, almost brushing. I wanted to close the gap, to anchor myself in her skin, but fear held me back. Fear of everything, of people seeing, of the line we were crossing, of the consequences we'd both claimed we didn't want. But then something inside her shifted. I could see it in her eyes, sharp, urgent, an unspoken confession that she wasn't in control either. The tiniest hesitation, the tremor in her fingers as they hovered near mine, the way she leaned in just enough that our knees brushed, our bodies dangerously close. The air between us was taut, humming, almost unbearable. "I shouldn't want this," she said, voice low, almost broken. And yet, her words stopped mid-sentence as she glanced toward the door, suddenly aware of the space around us. I didn't move, couldn't move. My hand hovered near hers, trembling slightly. She leaned closer anyway, and I felt the warmth of her shoulder against mine, the soft brush of her hair across my cheek. My breath hitched. Time slowed. Every sound, every flicker of light, seemed magnified. Her lips were inches from mine, so close I could feel the heat, the unspoken promise, the pull that had been building for weeks. My hand twitched, wanting to reach up, to touch her, to close the final distance. Then she whispered something that made my blood freeze. "Do you at?" The words didn't finish, but the question hung between us, charged, dangerous, unavoidable. I leaned in, my lips just above hers, and the moment stretched endlessly, trembling on the edge of what could change everything. And then, the cafe door opened again, the bell jingling, and the world intruded, shoving us apart in an instant. The cafe had emptied, leaving us alone with the soft hum of the espresso machine and the distant city noise. I thought the interruption had given us a reprieve, a moment to step back, but apparently, it hadn't been enough. Her phone buzzed sharply, and she glanced at it, eyes narrowing slightly. Then she froze, her hand gripping the edge of the table as if bracing herself. "It's someone I wasn't expecting," she muttered, voice tight. I leaned slightly forward, curiosity and concern pulling me closer. "Who?" Her lips pressed together, almost a line of steel. "My ex," she admitted, her eyes flicking to mine, searching. "He said he'd be around today. I didn't tell you because I thought it wouldn't matter, but—" She broke off, her fingers brushing the table, brushing mine in a fleeting, accidental touch that made my heart lurch. I wanted to say something reassuring, to tell her it didn't matter, but the words stuck. Instead, I stayed still, letting the brush of her fingers against mine linger just a fraction too long. The warmth was electric, the contact impossible to ignore. "Safe," she whispered, almost to herself, almost ironic. She laughed, but it trembled, brittle. "Safe is a lie, isn't it?" I nodded slowly, my throat tight. Safe was never the word I'd associate with her, or with us. Every stolen glance, every near touch, every pause between us had been a small rebellion against the world that told us we shouldn't. And now the rules had changed again. She shifted in her chair, leaning slightly closer, and I felt it immediately, her shoulder grazing mine, the subtle warmth of her side brushing against me. It was intimate, defiant, a quiet assertion of presence that no one else could challenge. My fingers twitched, almost reaching for hers again, but I stopped, hovering just short of contact. "I didn't tell you everything," she admitted, voice low, tinged with something like guilt. "About before. About how I feel. About the—" She stopped, her hand moving toward her face, brushing hair behind her ear. The gesture was small, unconscious, and yet it spoke volumes. I swallowed hard. The tension between us tightened, heavy and almost unbearable. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment the world shrank again. Every misstep, every hesitation, every thought about what others would think vanished. All that existed was this dangerous, unspoken pull. Then she leaned back slightly, as if testing boundaries, and the chair scraped softly against the floor. My chest tightened, not from anger, not from fear, but from longing. The air between us crackled, charged with things we couldn't name. "I shouldn't want this," she whispered again, and my stomach twisted. She moved toward the door, then paused, glancing at me over her shoulder. That look, half challenge, half plea, made my breath catch. I knew in that moment that whatever happened next, whatever choices we made, the line had already been crossed. Desire, fear, guilt, they were all tangled together now, and there was no stepping back. So I rose slightly, heart pounding, closing the distance as I let my hand hover near hers once more. And when our eyes met, I knew we were about to decide whether this, all of it, was worth the risk. The cafe had grown quiet again, the late afternoon sun painting warm, golden streaks across the floor. We sat across from each other, but the distance felt irrelevant. Every breath, every slight movement, every flutter of her eyelashes reached me as if nothing else existed. She leaned forward just slightly, and I caught the faint brush of her hand against mine again. I didn't pull away this time. The contact was electric, a spark that seemed to thread through every nerve in my body. My chest tightened, my heartbeat loud in my ears. "I can't," she began, voice low, trembling, then stopped. Her words faltered, caught somewhere between caution and desire. I leaned forward, closing the space just a fraction, enough that her hair brushed my cheek. Her perfume, a quiet, warm scent, swirled around me, dizzying, intoxicating. "You don't have to," I whispered, voice almost breaking. I wanted to say more, to confess every thought I'd held back, but even that felt dangerous. Instead, I let my fingers hover near hers, hovering, waiting, letting the tension between us do the talking. Her eyes searched mine, wide, vulnerable, and fiercely guarded all at once. "I shouldn't," she tried again, but the words faltered under the weight of what we both knew. She was saying no while meaning yes, a contradiction that made my chest ache. The space between us seemed to shrink with every heartbeat. Her shoulder brushed mine under the table, our knees touching lightly, and every small contact sent jolts through me I couldn't deny. I leaned slightly closer, my lips just inches from hers, and she leaned in too, the tilt of her head small, deliberate, unavoidable. For a moment, the world disappeared. There was no guilt, no expectation, no one to judge us. There was only the pull between us, raw, messy, human. Her breath mingled with mine, warm and quick. My hand twitched, aching to reach up, to touch the side of her face, to brush the hair behind her ear. But I waited, letting the moment stretch and thrum with possibility. Then, slowly, carefully, she placed her hand over mine. Just that small, deliberate touch, but it was enough. Enough to tip the scales, enough to surrender the quiet restraint we had maintained for weeks. My fingers tightened slightly around hers, anchoring us both in the present. "I'm not stepping back," I said, voice low, almost a growl, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she exhaled softly, a sound that carried relief, longing, and a quiet surrender all at once. We didn't speak after that. Words felt unnecessary. The world had narrowed to two bodies, two hearts, two people finally acknowledging the magnetic, undeniable pull that had been growing between them. Every hesitation, every fear, every stolen glance led to this. A choice made in silence, a surrender neither of us regretted. When I finally tilted my head, our foreheads resting together lightly, her hand still in mine, I understood her fully. She understood me. All the layers, the age, the fear, the past mistakes, the longing, collapsed into a single, undeniable truth. This connection, this fragile, messy, beautiful thing between us, was real, and we were no longer hiding from it. The afternoon sun had softened into a golden haze, spilling warmth across the small park where we ended up walking. Neither of us spoke much. Words felt unnecessary now. Every glance, every slight touch, carried more meaning than sentences ever could. Her hand found mine first, fingers curling naturally into mine, as if they'd been waiting for this all along. I squeezed gently, testing, reassuring, and she returned the gesture with that quiet, certain smile I had memorized long ago. No hesitation this time, no doubts, just presence, and the soft rhythm of hearts finally aligned. We paused on a bench overlooking the little fountain, water sparkling in the late light. She leaned slightly against me, her shoulder brushing mine, subtle but intimate. I could feel her warmth, steady, calming, grounding me in a way nothing else had. You don't regret this, do you?" I asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Her hand tightened slightly around mine. "No," she said simply, voice soft, confident, and unburdened. "I was scared before, worried about what people would think, about the gap between us. But I'm not anymore. Not with you." I swallowed, the lump in my throat gone, replaced with a warmth that spread through my chest. "Me neither," I admitted, letting myself lean closer. My fingers brushed the side of her face, a light, careful touch, and she leaned into it, resting her forehead lightly against mine. The contact was electric and grounding all at once. We stayed like that for a while, the world fading until only the two of us remained. No fear, no hesitation, just this quiet, unspoken understanding that everything, every stolen glance, every moment of tension, every ounce of longing, had led us here. She tilted her head and smiled, eyes soft and warm. "We're messy," she said, voice low, playful even. "But somehow I think it works." I laughed quietly, leaning into her, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her chest against mine. "Yeah," I murmured, "messy but real." And in that moment, all the previous anxiety, all the hesitation about the age gap, all the societal whispers and personal doubts, it didn't matter. We had each other. We had chosen this, together. She shifted slightly, resting her hand fully in mine, our fingers interlacing naturally. I brushed my thumb across her knuckles, and she closed her eyes, leaning into the motion. It felt like home. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. Real and tender and utterly human. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, we sat there in quiet contentment, a soft closeness that needed no words. The moment stretched, sensual but safe, warm without urgency, like we'd finally arrived somewhere worth staying. And as we stood to leave, I brushed her hair from her face once more, leaning in to rest my forehead against hers. She sighed softly, and I whispered, "We're here." Finally, she smiled, her lips just grazing mine in a light, gentle promise. And I knew we were exactly where we were meant to be. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?